Hi there, welcome back to the Single Malt Review. We're finishing our foray into Glenglassaugh with the Torfa, their peated expression.
Yes indeed. Lucky last here, and it is, after a quick squiz on the internet, a 20 ppm peated, which is pretty low. It's fairly low. It's about as low as you'd find anything on Islay. 50% unchill filtered, uncoloured, 100% bourbon matured expression. So should be pretty easy to get at what it's got for us here.
Yeah, practically identical hue to the
very pale
Tennessee whiskey matured evolution we tried last time. Yep.
20 ppm may be fairly low, but it is fairly unmistakably.
They call it richly peated.
Yeah, richly peated.
As opposed to heavily or...
Yeah, I think richly peated is the scientific term. Lightly peated it might be, but that's pretty obvious on the nose. That's kind of the first thing that hits you.
Yeah.
It's like the last one, it's very pale, which makes me think these were, at least maybe not all of them, first fill ex-sherries.
Ex-bourbons even.
Oh, ex-bourbons, of course. Like the last one, although there was an additional question there because they were Tennessee barrels and Tennessee whiskey, they're allowed to reuse theirs, so who knows. But these ones, either way, not imparting a huge amount of colour onto the whiskey.
Yeah. Again, we're dealing with a fairly young whiskey, which is evident in the nose. It's got all the hallmarks of a young bourbon matured whiskey, which has been a big thing in recent years. Younger whiskey, exclusively bourbon matured. Normally something that would be, traditionally something that would be perhaps overlooked or downplayed in whiskey circles, but it's really coming into its own and getting a lot of traction and a lot of respect lately.
Yeah, this one, I think, initially at least, it's the prickliest of the three we've had. That's quite dangerous to get too near.
There's a healthy amount of peat, but a lot of bourbon cask character too. Plenty of citrus and pepper, and some of that oak and vanilla as well.
Yeah, I was wondering what peat they had used, but this smells like Islay peat to me. This smells like something that's come out of...
Yeah, it's got
those maltings.
a hint of Cal Yellow or Brooklady to it.
It's very maritime, very iodine inspired. So, I think Islay whiskey, not mainland peated whiskey. Don't think Ardmore or something like that. And any other notes necessarily out of the nose, I think are being confused more by my memories of other Islay peated whiskies. I'm imagining citrus, lemon citrus in here, a la Colilla or Ard Beg, but whether those are so intrinsically linked to my memories of those peated flavours that I'm not sure how strongly they are in here, but we'll assume there's a little bit of those going on. But anyway, we'll try it at full strength and see how it speaks to us.
Oh man, there is some lemon sherbet and sorbet there. There's a little bit of a cigar smoke, peaty quality. It's rich without being overwhelming, and it's quite tasty and fulfilling. It's lingering. It's really rolling over the tongue, lingering in the mouth. There's quite a sharp prickle to that. The high strength is exacerbated by the quite young spirit.
That 20 ppm, may be not so much as other whiskies. That's distinctly peated on the palate, and it's a very long. It's a charry, slightly tarry. It's a pretty gnarly peat there. It's quite tarry, oily, char, quite dry. It's not unlike Ard Beg's peating, really.
Now, with a younger whiskey, you get a lot of the sort of more raw spirit characters, and that merges nicely with the peat, which is also quite strong.
Yeah, raw spirit and raw peat as well. The younger a peated whiskey is, the more evident, the more expressive that peat is. And it's approachable at full strength. I think more than the evolution was, but I'll put a wee bit of water in anyway.
I'm going to sample a little more at its full strength. Yeah, the bourbon casks provide a good kind of a canvas to layer other flavours onto. You've got a good distinct character from bourbon on its own, but that provides a good showcase for both those fresh young spirit characters and also the peat. If this had been sherry matured, perhaps it would be so much harder to get good peat qualities and to be lost in kind of a noise. This way, though,
I think it does well for a bit of water. It does well for being more like 46% as opposed to 50.
That's mellowing out the
I'm
peat
going to put a wee bit
enormously.
more in. Yeah.
And just giving a gentle, creamy citrus and slightly oaky, but still generously smoky whiskey.
Yeah, I'll see if I can summarise here. Very peaty, predominantly dry, somewhat fruity, but lighter fruits. You know, lemon, citrus, think Collila, Ardbeg, the sort of fruits that they bring along. Not particularly sweet. Definitely, you know, on the dry end of the spectrum, a long way from sweet. Not unrefreshing. It's pretty bone dry actually, as whiskies go. It's fairly austere, and I think that lends it to a particular. It's almost a foodie whiskey. If you imagine this whiskey with, say, some cold smoked salmon, you would be in heaven, I think. It's a whiskey that I think needs a little bit of backup from something else. It's a hard one to, it's not an aperitif style whiskey, it's a hard one to just drink on its own because it is so bone dry, which means the peat just kind of piles up there on the tongue, and as you drink it, for me at least, it becomes gradually harder work without something to offset that. And I think as it gains age, it will, with the addition of water, get sort of sweeter and more sort of lush and moorish. But at its young age, it's quite, not bare bones, but it is quite bare. It's quite, it's very, very dry and quite unyielding in its flavours. Even though it brings them across quite strongly, it's just quite, it's very buttoned up, I think. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's a bit of a, putting me in mind of a puff on a cigar after a fairly rich meal. The bourbon characters have lent a bit to the whiskey underneath here. But it's obviously quite a young spirit, so strong and fiery, and the bourbon characters are present without being overwhelming. The peat also is certainly not overwhelming, but it's a strong presence. It's really driving this one.
Yeah, it's a whiskey that does, I think, quite well for the fact that there's no real... The new make in this isn't obvious at all. For a whiskey that, by its colour, is clearly not got a lot of cask influence, and for a whiskey that is intrinsically going to be quite young, I would expect to taste some new make in here, and I think that has been 100% masked by the peating level. The peat has completely sort of capped that off, and there's no voice whatsoever of overly young, immature spirit here. But it doesn't have a lot of, it's not very well-rounded, there's no richness or sort of moorishness to this. If I was going to tweak this whiskey in a way, not that Glenglassaugh, I should say, needs advice from me, but I think a bit of maybe even fresh American oak would add a little warmth and richness and sweetness to this, so it would fill out this sort of void of flavour that's in there, because at the moment it's a whiskey that I can really respect. It's very, very clean, does what it does very well. It's just it really is just a bit too buttoned up for me. I need a little bit more flamboyance
I reckon
in my dram.
A little bit of a sherry cask influence. We've got a few barrels of sherry matured whiskey in there too. The same thing, same amount of peat. You would just have more of an explosion of fruit and flavour and colour on top of just the bare bones template provided by the bourbon barrels.
Yeah, I think like we're coming to this from different ends, but what the consensus we've come to is this is a whiskey that needs a little bit of help from some direction. It needs a little more wood influence in here from either, well, I suggested fresh bourbon, Dave suggested, as Dave is wont to do, sherry wood, and I think both would probably benefit in different ways. Not both at once, don't do both. Please, that would probably create some Frankensteinian awfulness, but I think, yes, both ways, be it a finish, be it anything, I think it just needs, it's a whiskey that needs, it's waiting for something more to fill out its profile. And whether it will get that in the future, I think it probably will. It came out in 2014. So whether this is a tweaked version of that, or whether it's the same spirit in here, we don't know. But
it's definitely under 9 years old.
Yeah,
I'd say that much with certainty.
Yeah. No, Glenglassaugh is certainly a whisky in a state of constant flux as it kind of finds its new self, under its new management and its new form. So we will keep watch on all of these. But for me, this one, I can only give it a 79 for me. It's a competent whisky. It's just not one that really hits me. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm on par actually. 79 is a very good score from this. Definitely, it's full of strong points. It's got the clarity and the straightforward honesty you get from having one type of cask and a certain amount of peat, aged quite young, lets a lot happen, but doesn't have too many layers or depths. It could do with something more.
Yeah.
What it is good. It's perfectly enjoyable. It just could go further, and maybe will with time.
I think it will. Under revisions, I think we can expect more from this one in the future. Out of the three, though, the revival is the one that really bowled me over.
Definitely,
The revival has something that not just these three whiskies, but most whiskies in the world doesn't. It's got this incredible texture. So, like, in conclusion, if this revival, a tiny wee bottle that we have, I wish it was bigger now that we've tried it, if this is a sign of things to come, then Glenglassaugh is going to be 100% a distillery to watch.
Yeah.
What we don't know is whether whatever's in there is kind of a one-off, because as I said, that in no way reflects the revival of a few years ago. That was an insipid, bad whiskey, honestly. Based on my tasting of it then, we didn't review it. I just tried someone else's bottle, but and that revival now, that's really stunning.
Yeah.
So there's no way of knowing without doing some real internet detectorship exactly which batch that came out of, because they keep on making this particular whiskey. But if that's the direction that it's heading, then Glenglassaugh is absolutely a distillery to watch. And it will be a real shame if that was just some sort of one-off flash in the pan, and that came from something they'd put in there, like one of these rogue red wine casks in there that just completely transformed the whiskey. I don't think it is, and I certainly hope it's not, because that texture, that weight of flavour, that is something I really want to taste again. That was something that has genuinely surprised me, which is something that happens less every year, sadly. But
I was also quite blown away by this particular revival expression. But even having said that, there was nothing we've tried out of this lineup which was in any way disappointing or truly left me wanting something more. They're all good. They're all very good whiskies, especially considering how little time their distillery has been reopened.
Yeah.
There's very old Glenglassaugh still available, but out of the young offerings, all very good, all very different too, which is a key point. Variety, diversity.
Yeah, certainly. Like three good whiskies, one quite transformative whiskey.
Yeah.
Anyone, I think, the advice I'd give is anyone like me who was maybe a bit jaded on revival after tasting it a few years ago, when it was a sort of weirdly pink-looking, insipid thing, have another look. That's the one bit of buyer's advice I've gotten out of this myself, is that I'm going to keep an eye on that revival now, because that was really something else, something quite out of the park. So anyway, I think we've got one more thing on the agenda, another peated thing that you might not quite expect. So stay around for that one, and we'll be right back. Slanjo, and I will pretend to drink an empty glass.
You're back with a single malt review, and with any threesome, the most important question is who finishes last. And that is the worst thing I've ever seen on camera, so let's do that again.
Good one for after the video.
Sorry. Try to be serious.